violence that is lifelong. Now, incident-related is much closer to what we usually see service people coming into the courts for. And the reason we see them in the courts is not because they are the classic domestic violence perpetrator. That's the pattern violence. We'll talk about those bastards later. And I refer to them like that because they are, okay? And we're going to talk about people who are situational, who are under stress, who are trying to deal with a return home that has put them at odds with their view of life. And that all of a sudden, their ability to say, you know, I understand my life and I understand my world, it's compromised. And it's compromised by depression. And it's compromised by their ability to put their life back together and make it operate for them and make it function for them. I call this cascade. It's a cascade of depression. And what happens first is isolation. People withdraw. And when they withdraw, guess what they can't do? They can't get help because they're hiding. They're hiding from their feelings and they're hiding from help. And they're afraid to reach out because they don't want people to know that they're struggling. So if you see somebody going down a river and they can't swim very well right now, even though they were great swimmers in the past, maybe they've got cramps, maybe they have, you know, something bit them, there's something wrong, and all of a sudden they're drowning. You don't stand on the side of the bank and wave goodbye to them. And these are absolutely normal responses to trauma. Victims of crime have it. We know from the work that Dr. Bruce Perry did that babies who are exposed to violence have PTSD and sometimes organic brain damage, even though they've never been touched. They've just been exposed to violence. First responders, cops, firefighters, paramedics, all of those people who live in harm's way have the same effects that warriors have. So you're not alone, which is really a good thing. Because if you were alone, you'd have to suffer alone because we wouldn't know how to do anything for you because we wouldn't have enough people to study and make it better. But all of the people who went through shell shock in World War I and the people who went through combat stress and they didn't know what it was in World War II, and the people who served in Korea and took it home with them, and the people who went to Vietnam and not only took it home with them, but they came home like you did. They flew home. And so one day they're in Vietnam, the next day they're at home. And trying to put that together is a big shock. And when the Vietnam veterans came back, they really got worked over. And we've learned a long time ago that blaming the warrior for the war is wrong, and it doesn't do anything to heal anyone. And you know, yesterday I was listening to the news, and they're talking about the number of homeless people who are veterans. A lot of those people are Vietnam veterans. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to be that way. It doesn't mean that your friend has to be that way. It just means that we have to understand what's going on so that we can get to you. If you have a cascade, what happens is everything you do pushes you lower. And the first thing that most guys do, and women too, is drink. And they start drinking alcohol. I am not here to tell you not to drink unless you drive, because if you drive, you might kill somebody else. But if you just go home and you take your feelings and you stuff them in a bottle, what's going to happen is that alcohol is a depressant. So if you're depressed and you're taking a depressant, you ain't going to get any better. And I got news for you. No one has been cured by alcohol. No one. In fact, it makes it difficult for you to get to cure because first you have to go through alcohol rehabilitation. Because as long as the therapist is talking to the alcohol, there is no growth. So alcohol is good for having a good time, watching the Super Bowl, having a barbecue with your buddies, but it doesn't cure depression, and you need to know that. And if you see somebody starting to drink really heavily, and you think that they might be having a problem, talk to them. Talk to them about what they're doing. Get them to vocalize. You're going to be the person who's going to be able to get to them faster than anybody else. Okay, so we know that being isolated and then enforcing the isolation with alcohol doesn't work. What does work is getting out and talking to somebody who actually knows what they're doing and how to break the depression cycle. It is important when you're looking at domestic violence cases to make that differentiation between people who are incident related and may have combat stress or PTSD, and people who are, doing it for fun and laughs. A person who is doing it because they are driven there by depression can be helped. But if you get arrested, you're still screwed. Because all of us law enforcement people, and I'm a judge, I'm a law enforcement person, or I was a judge, we all took an oath. When I was a prosecutor, I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the state of California. And we enforce the law. That means we start making decisions about you and what we're going to do with you and to you. And you don't want us doing that. It is important to understand that we make certain assumptions about a DV case when it comes into the court. One, we believe all domestic violence is intentional. It is not an accident. It is not the product of alcohol. It is an intentional act that is focused on a victim, and violence is perpetrated for the reason of getting control of that victim. Now, I used to have people tell me all the time, well, she pissed me off, and I got mad and hit her. Okay. You cannot blame the victim for the injury. Okay? Now, I get asked at every conference by Marines, hey, how come it's not fair, like when girls start, or the women start the fight, and they slap you, and then you respond, or you just try to get them under control, and then you get arrested. The reason is, the person who gets arrested is not who started the fight. The person who gets arrested is the one who wins the fight, okay? So if you're in a fight with your girlfriend, and you're a trained warrior, and she isn't, who's going to win that fight? It's going to be her. She might have started it, but you're going to jail. And that is the result of an assault. It's a crime, and we take it all very seriously. Now, why are the courts so involved in this? Frankly, it's because 1 woman in 5, at some point in time in their life, is going to be the subject of a violent assault. And so we started to see a lot of dead bodies showing up, in the emergency room, people beaten practically to death. Some people just beaten a little bit. Some people strangled. And then we became aware of the stalkers who are focused on revenge or focused on them for some other deviant reason. And so we took a very proactive approach. When we get people in the courts who are charged with domestic violence, it's no more, oh, well, it's just between a girlfriend and a boyfriend, or, oh, no, it's just part of the family. You don't interfere with the family. Boy, do we interfere with families, okay? I used to take people out of their homes, put them in jail if they violated my orders. They didn't get to see their kids unless I had a psychologist sitting there. So it was very, very harmful to them and their continued existence, because when we got through with you, your life didn't look like it did before the assault. How do you get out of this thing? It's really easy. I'm going to tell you how not to go to jail. Walk out. When you feel that you're coming into a conflict situation, and I'm using the male reference, but 85% of the guys who are arrested are men, and 85% of the guys who are, and 15% are women. And so I had a lot of mean, vicious bitches. And women commit domestic violence, but most domestic violence is committed by men. So I'm going to use the male reference, and you have to excuse me. If I had time, I got some really great women's stories, but I'm not going to go in that place. We think it's an intentional behavior because the victim is chosen. It's not a random event. It is never an accident. It's not the product of alcohol. Even if you're drunk, you still have enough mental capacity to choose the victim that you assault. And because it's an intentional act, it is not the product of delusion or craziness or depression, okay? The reason that you want to be careful if you are having difficulty and you are drinking is you will make a really bad decision. And that decision is going to be made because alcohol has two sides. One of them is it relieves you of your inhibitions, so you have less guards on your personality. That's why guys get in fights, okay? All right, they're ready to go to town. And if you are in a situation where you're having a dispute with either your girlfriend or your wife or your dating partner, and you are under the influence of alcohol and your inhibitions are gone, you're going to go to town faster than you are if you have the ability not to make a bad decision. Now, if you do understand that, then you'll understand how to stay out of my clutches. And I'm saying my clutches because I'm talking for all of the judges around the country. And you'll understand that as a principal perpetrator, I don't care who started it, okay? You finished it. And if you finished it and there's substantial bruising or strangulation, keep your hands and your arms and any other appendage off the throat. Don't do that. If you do that, yeah, you'll get control all right. But if I see marks, or when I saw marks, and we took any bruising, because if you know how to do it, and you all know how to do it, you can kill somebody in 5 seconds. And even if you don't kill them, you can cause substantial bruising, and they can die later. So it's very important. Keep your hands off the throat. The other thing I want to tell you is that when we see a certain level of violence, a certain level of damage, or there's been prior events, then you're basically out of town. We can't do much for you. You're going to go to jail. You're going to go to a year-long treatment program. We're going to charge you lots of money. You might have a lawyer that you have to pay. And in the end, your career is over. And not only is your career over, but because the domestic violence conviction carries so many orders, like Lautenberg, no guns, you ain't getting any more guns, okay? Not that I don't like guns. I have my own .40 caliber Glock, and I'm pretty good with it. But, if I got in a domestic violence situation, I'd lose that. Now, the best gun I ever shot was a .50 caliber, and I have never gotten over it, okay? But I am telling you, you won't have any because we're going to take them from you. We're going to make sure you don't have any guns. And as Marines, you understand what that means. Now, this conviction is going to prevent you from going into law enforcement, becoming a firefighter, thank you, and it's going to stop you from getting a lot of jobs where you're going to be licensed, like a teacher or a lawyer or even a paramedic. All of those things will go away with that conviction. So walk out, leave. I don't care what she says or he says, if you leave, you're never coming home. Forget it. Walk out the door and keep walking, and don't go drinking, because you might decide to go back and finish the argument, okay? Nothing that you do that night is better for you than leaving. No one ever got arrested for leaving, okay? You can send her flowers, you can send her candy, you can take her to dinner, you can, call them up and tell them how much you miss them, and that you really, really want to, have them back, and we'll talk about it. You can talk about it forever. You can go to counseling. You can do all kinds of things, but you've got to walk out when you feel that anger rising in your chest and throat, okay? Now, the other kind of mean bastard stuff that I was talking about, I want you to draw on your pads real quick, and you can do it on the page that has my name on it, just a triangle, okay? And on that triangle, at the top, you're going to put entitlement, okay? And while you're drawing that and putting that word up there, I'm going to tell you what that means. Entitlement in this sense means that the person who is the domestic violence perpetrator feels that they're entitled to control the other person's behavior. They think that they have a God-given right to be in control of the family, to be in control of the girlfriend, to be in control of the children, and I'm not talking about parental control.